say you're fine, but I can see right through. You're holding your secrets for way too long. This can't keep going on. With every lie, they keep on hurting you, getting away with everything they do. This can't keep going on. No, we're gonna find them, and I'm gonna fight for you. They better start hiding. We'll be running with the lions, lions. We'll be running with the lions, lions. They can't run, they can't hide. We won't stop until they're down. We'll be running with the lions, lions.
Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. I'm your host, Dr. Kalpana Sundar, and welcome to another episode of Gloves Off. Today, I'm very, very excited because I have Dr. Doreen Downing as my guest. And, you know, it's always funny how sometimes you meet people that are just have shared similar experiences. And for anybody who's been watching the show, you probably know that the voice and finding my voice has been an integral part of not only my life, but my redeveloping myself and also my authenticity. And I have to say, there are a lot of people out there that talk about speaking skills and whatnot, but they don't do it in quite the same way. And that's why I was so interested to have Dr. Downing on the show today. But before we get into all that, for those of you who are new and have not seen an episode of Gloves Off, I'm happy to have you here. And the show is really about people who are following their authenticity, doing something courageous in the world. And I have a guest every single week that shows exactly that. And then, of course, to all of you who have been watching, I'm so grateful to have you back. So I wanted to just mention something about the voice that's very important to me. I feel like the voice is like a fingerprint. You know, everybody's voice has a distinctive tone. They have a distinctive cadence through their voice. It is very, very personal. And there is a way that a person's voice sounds when they're not being authentic, when they're being disingenuous. And there's a different flow that the voice has when they are being completely authentic. There's a confidence you can hear in the voice, and it makes all the difference in the world. One small story I'd like to share is the fact that when I was actually starting to find my voice is I noticed when I started singing that it didn't sound like me. And I found that interesting. And in the back of my mind, I thought to myself, well, one day when I'm really authentic and I know who I really am, I'm going to be able to sing in the way that I want to. And it's funny how that has been exactly what has happened. Not only has it translated into my personal voice, speaking voice, but also into my singing voice. So I just thought it was something interesting that I wanted to share. So before we get Doreen on our camera today and onto the show, I do want to introduce our sponsors. Number one, Business Done Better. You can find them at businessdonebetter.co. So if you are a small business owner, I've got the website down there. If you're a small business owner and you don't want to have employees because employees are hard work, this is a company that you may want to consider because it can do so many different things for you. I use them for all of honestly, anything I can think of, I do. You know, I produce a lot of different content. I have a couple of different businesses. So any of those business related items, I have a assistant that can help me with things, logos, email sequences, newsletters, whatnot. It has been so valuable for me to have their help because I'm not so great with all those computery type of things. So for anybody who is just like me and needs help, well, you may want to consider using them. And also for anybody who is looking for accountants, I want to just play a little video from Elevated CPA. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like tax time comes faster and faster every year. It's kind of like your birthday, just every year it comes by faster. But anyway, I wanted to introduce our guest today, Dr. Doreen Downing, who is a psychologist and a fearless speaking mentor. Her approach is practical, empowering, and it comes from real life experience, which I frankly don't know what that experience is, so I can't wait to find out. But she believes that the key to effortless speaking and confident speaking is connecting with the essence of who you truly are. And that's what I love about her approach. So we are going to deep dive into that conversation in just a second. Hello, Doreen. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I've been excited about this episode for so long. So welcome to Gloves Off.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed listening to both the intro that you had with all those amazing people with their gloves on or off, and just the arms outstretched and just the freedom. And that's what I think when we find our voice, there's so much freedom.
I totally agree with you. And I had to give a little bit of a talk about voices and how you and I connected. And I love that we see this the same way because, as you also know, because this is what you do, there are a lot of people who are out there helping people speak. And nobody is really, not nobody I've met, has taken this unique approach that it's really about connecting with who you are. So I wanted to really hear about how that came about for you.
Yes, well, my own personal experience, as you pointed to before. And I would say that as a quieter type of person, as somebody who's more introverted, somebody who's, I would say I'm highly sensitive, to put myself in a situation like some of those training, the traditional training programs, even Toastmasters, which I did excel at. I learned how to do a speech with vocal variety and gestures. But I think that my quiet voice, my little one that I held back all my life, and that's another story, but just to say that I needed a different kind of process that was safe for me to go deeper and deeper and say, hello in there, little one. I know you're afraid to come out, but I can help you. So there was a way in which I discovered some secrets that made it safe for the little one inside to feel, well, some of what you showed in the beginning, more authentic, more powerful, more free to be me.
So tell us a little about this. Tell us about this little one that's in there. Explain that to us.
Okay, we'll go. You said deep, dive deep, right?
I love diving deep. That's what this whole show is about. We're going to get into it.
Oh, already I'm feeling a
Oh no.
little
Well,
vulnerable, but I'll go
well,
there.
we can wait. We can wait too.
Well,
So
I think it's a good, actually, it's a good starting point and may help listeners to realize that the wounded voice sometimes is very early in life. And just because you have some problems speaking up or you struggle with it, it's not because you don't know how to make a better speech. It may be because in your early years, unbeknownst to you, there were some influences, or maybe you just came into this world as a quieter, more sensitive type. But for me personally, I would say my mom was, well, they called it manic depressive at the time. Now they call it borderline. But it
mhm,
was back and forth in the hospital.
mhm,
And when she would come back, my grandmother was staying with us. And my grandma would always say, now be quiet, or your mom is going to go back into the hospital. And so that kind of deep dive is what I had to do to go back and find the root of where I felt most afraid to express myself. See, I mean, I didn't have a microphone. It's not about a stage, right?
mhm.
It's like little Reenie coming out into this world, and is it safe for her to stand up, throw her arms out, express herself, and be all she can be as a little girl? And it
Mm.
wasn't okay. It was not okay. Or I was going to be responsible for my mom getting sick and leaving me again. So that, I think, is a core root, and partly what maybe I should just stop right there and let that land, because
That's a lot. I mean,
yeah, I just
no,
felt it
and
myself. I wanted
so,
to move on quickly and show
you
how
know,
it applies, but I think just
what I
to,
love about what you shared is
uh,
that so many of us have that little one. I mean, I just wanted to clarify what that meant to you because I didn't want to make assumptions. But we all, I would imagine every single one of us, I know I did, I had a wounded little one too that was not able to be seen. So I really greatly appreciate the fact that you shared that vulnerable story because I believe that when we cannot speak up, we probably all have some wound of some sort. It may not be the same type, but the same something that has wounded us. And we then become afraid to speak up, to be authentic, because we think something is going to happen.
right. And it's pocketed away because we're in a developmental process, meaning next, we've got to grow up, we've got to go to school, we've got to get social, we've got to get our grades. And so that the more insecure, the vulnerable parts of ourselves, we tuck away. Or sometimes we say that we abandon them or we exile them, and we just necessarily have to move on in our lives.
Right. One thing I wanted to mention is that you said you were introverted and quieter. So one thing I wanted to point out because I feel that people can do either that or they could go the other way and become louder
Good point.
because of the wound. Because I know because I've done the opposite. I become just louder, but not authentic loudness. It's a fabricated, disingenuous loudness.
Oh,
And I obviously don't have that so much anymore, but this was the way that I grew up because I felt I couldn't be myself for different reasons. I grew up in an Indian family, so you just couldn't be who you are. You had to fall within some mold, and I felt like if I didn't fit in the mold, which I didn't, I felt that I would be not unloved. And I was unloved when I wasn't fitting into the mold. My parents weren't happy with me. So I couldn't let that part of me come out. So what I did instead was become rebellious,
oh,
loud,
uh-huh.
fighting, argumentative, all those things. So I think it can manifest in two different ways.
Yes, I love that you pointed to that aspect also, because there's the full spectrum of how we defend ourselves, right? There's kind of more of a muscled kind, and then there's more of a retreating kind. So I'm
Mhm.
glad you mentioned that. And you also mentioned and pointed to culture. And I would say I have 5 areas when I start working with somebody, because people are a puzzle, but I
Mhm.
know if they're working on finding their voice, something somewhere along the line has happened. And so I always get curious, first of all, their culture. What were the messages that they got from their culture? And you just pointed to a big one, right?
Mhm.
You had
Yeah.
to, you had to fit in or else, and they had an image of what they wanted for you, and it was a mold, you said. So
I was probably supposed to have little braids and just be an Indian girl here in America. I think they didn't anticipate that when you bring an Indian girl to America at 10 months old, she becomes American.
yes, 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 in this society. So that would be also an aspect, I would say, is I need to look at societal norms, even if it's not a cultural one, it still is in our society expectations of little girls, like you said, the pigtails or the braids, and just kind of perky and bouncy, and oh, isn't she so cute? The kind of living into the expectations of our society. And then, of course, I'm still kind of looking at more early life, but then if I go further with those expectations of the icon of sexuality, and is that something that we're supposed to put out there? And in order to get seen and heard and noticed, look at our advertising. So again, how do we be authentic? And so coming back to the how I puzzle is first cultural,
Okay.
the societal norms and
Okay.
expectations. Maybe it's just family. That would be the third one. And there's so much in family, so much. There are the way parents treat you. You mentioned some of that. There are siblings, you know, when you got siblings, there are often problems because an older one may bully or mistreat the younger one, or maybe they're five, maybe they're 10 kids and you don't have any space and everybody's talking and you just said, okay, everybody else is talking and I don't have an opportunity. I can't edge in. So it becomes a pattern early on in terms of how the family system is and what's expected of you, and where you are on the birth order is also sometimes pretty important.
It's always so interesting because there's so much of an interplay with the dynamics between, parents and the children, the siblings, and all. And what I read somewhere once that I thought was very interesting is that each child has a different version of their parents.
Uh-huh.
And
Nice.
I thought that was such a, I remember when I don't remember where I read it, but I just thought about that. And I said, that is so interesting because for me, I had one set of parents because I was the oldest. So when they came to America, they were very stressed. They were very trying to conform and figure things out. 3 years later, my sister was born. I think they were probably similar to that way. But 11 years later, with my brother, they were entirely different people.
Oh, that is really insightful. And I would say that even my sister, we're only 11 months apart. Sometimes we talk and she says, I don't remember that. Did mom do that? And we'll share stories and they are different points of view.
Right. So so that I could see how that could be very instrumental in shaping a human being and how they speak up. And each child does have a very different perception. I've had the same conversation with my brother, and it's almost like we're talking about two different sets of parents.
Yes, well, in a way, that's what you said you were. They were different because of circumstances and living in a different country, and also the age. By the time 11 years went by,
Big difference, big difference. And
yeah,
so how do you utilize this to helping people, or were there more?
there's a few more. Yeah,
Okay. I mean,
yeah.
I'm happy to hear them if you'd like to talk about them before I ask you my next question.
Yes, yes. I think it's important for listeners to be able to self-identify where on this, you know, continuum, if they feel like they have speaking anxiety, where it might have occurred. And I think a lot of people don't usually think that, oh, something happened way back when, because we've moved on in life and things aren't what they used to be, or it's just like, that was in the past. But our whole life experience is with us right here, right now. So let's see. I said, what did I say? I said culture. I said family. I said society. And the other is, we go into schools. Teachers.
Ooh,
How many stories have I had from clients that I've worked with about teachers who made them get up when they didn't feel comfortable doing that? And some of them have been actually uh, have really horrible memories. Somebody comes to mind right now who, in a sex education class when he was 12 years old, he raised his hand and asked a question. And the teacher just really made him feel so small, like, you shouldn't be asking that here, but where else? But later, when we were working on that, he went, look, I was the brave one in the class. So that's partly how, that's a whole nother story about how I help people reframe moments like that so that they see, there was something there that was powerful, something that was true to me, more true to me that was going on.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be, and so then that also leads to bullying,
Hmm.
right? That would be teasing, that people have experienced that. So who wants to get in front of people if you've had the experience of being teased?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one would be trauma. Mm, mm.
Okay.
Just coming to the United States, your parents, I mean, I think that could have created some trauma for them,
Right.
you growing up in an environment like that. But I think divorce, for me, parents getting divorced early on was traumatic. And it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, but a lot of people on my podcast do talk about abuse. So it could be anything from neglect or uh, super strict judgment or spankings or something that was more violating than it was healing, healthy, loving, growing energy to help the little kid. So that I would say when we're looking back over the childhood arena, those would be some of what I always do an assessment about.
Well, it sounds very thorough, and I think it's really so important for us to connect with who we are. It's really everything in life. I mean, I feel like our life's journey is to figure out who we really are. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what sometimes we do this "why are we here" thing to figure out who we are, and whatever that purpose it may be. But once we know who we are, I think the next step, which is our purpose, becomes really obvious. Well, it did to me anyway.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's really interesting. So, how do you translate the information that you've received from your clients to turn it around to help them speak in a more fearless way?
Well, first, it would be identifying it like they just did and become more self aware. And in that is huge, kind of to be able to say, oh, yeah, I understand. So there's a more of a separation from how it shows up, the fear right here, right now, with I understand where it happened, where it originated. And then there's some, because I've been a psychologist for 40 years, I have so many modalities I could reach into my bag of tricks and use, whether it's dialoguing with parts, whether it's systematic desensitization, where you just approach it gently, slowly until it dissolves that whatever trauma was.
Okay.
But I think that where what you just asked about the how, I would say that first is accepting that that was true for you, that there has to be, and nobody's to blame. It's just happened. It's just a facts. Now, how do we heal the wounded voice? And the way that we heal is, if you think of anything like a little animal that's scared, don't you go gently towards it with what? Compassion, I think is the word I would say. I think first we get curious.
Mhm.
Hey, what's this all about? And then we get compassionate. Oh, I understand. It was really hard giving that speech when I was, 11 years old to the whole student body in a big gym and everybody's snickering. How do we help that person who then was in that situation see that that was a brave act? And when you go brave, do you feel the difference when you go down and go, wow, even though it feels like it was a moment that you want to erase forever, it's like, let's go back. Let's just go back and find the power that was in that moment. That's deep dive work, right?
Very deep dive work. And we don't remember sometimes where we lost our power.
Yes.
And sometimes it just takes some work to get it back. I mean, I know for me, I've been working and working and working to find it again. And to be honest, I don't know where I lost it, but I lost it somewhere along the way. And one thing that I find interested in my speaking is if I'm speaking, so as an ear, nose, and throat physician and surgeon, I did speak a lot, but I found it very easy to speak about academic things, give presentations, no problem whatsoever. Since I have left that field and now I speak on other topics, it took more out of me because there are more vulnerable topics. So it took more out of me. And I feel like there are layers that I'm still working through. I'm able to get more vulnerable with my topics, and it's a process.
That's beautiful. In fact, uh, I do the podcast. I was just
Mhm.
having
I
somebody on.
was on it.
I know. And Carla King, who's a writer and helps people publish their books, said something I think pretty profound about what you just said about the vulnerability. And she suggests that the people go to the places where it's really, really raw. And when you write from raw, when you write from vulnerability, that's when there's a resonance that reaches people. But it takes courage. And then I talked about curiosity, and then I talk about compassion, and then I talk about courage because, like you said, maybe we don't really identify like the five aspects that I just talked about. Maybe we just never really know, that it isn't identified. Then we go, all right, well, then how do we go inside and not and go through whatever the sensation, the physical embodied sensations of contraction or shortness of breath. But the frame I like to give is that way down deep inside, that fear will lead you to the treasure.
Mhm. It is so true.
Yeah.
Fear, it's the worst feeling, but it often is the thing that leads you to that treasure. I love that. That is going to be that's an amazing quote. The fear leads you to the treasure.
Yeah. And
It's that
so if
thing
you,
I think that we work so hard to bury it, right? I
yes.
mean, Michael Singer talks about this in his book Untethered Soul.
So, mhm.
Yeah, he talks about it's like a thorn, and you do whatever you can to protect it, keep everything away from it. But if you just addressed it, it would be a lot easier.
Yes, and that's why the curiosity is the way to address it. Is let's just get curious. Let's just say, well, what's going on? And there needs to be some kind of separation that you're observing. You're an observer. You're a researcher of your own self, your own life.
Right. It gives you that little bit of separation to allow you to dig deep, because if you're too deeply personal with it, it could be so incredibly painful. And oh, frankly, who the heck wants to go there? It's too.
Well, that's partly why I think that people put off, they delay, they deny. They just don't want to get close to fear. But then something comes up, like somebody I worked with once who had a wedding, and it was 6 months out, and he knew he was afraid of speaking in front of people, and he knew he was going to do his vows in front of people, his family and friends, and that was his motivation to say, okay, I need, so that there oftentimes comes for people a reason, a bigger reason than the fear, like their why is bigger than the fear.
Yeah, I love saying that. And it's funny. And you and I have so many connection points. We just do different things with it. But that's exactly what I say to my clients, because most of my clients are in a business, or they want to go into their own business, but their
Mhm.
fear is holding them back.
Mhm.
And, I always say, make your why bigger than your fear.
Wow, yeah, I love that. I love that motivation. Yes. Yeah.
It's amazing how the same concepts can apply to so many different things, and we can utilize them in so many ways.
Yes.
I like to joke with my coaching clients too, because they're afraid of a lot of things, of course. I mean, going into your own business is very scary. I get that. I've done it numerous times. I always I put a little bit of a lighter spin on it, and I say, do you remember when you were a kid and you were afraid of monsters under the bed? And the idea of that monster was so big and so scary. But then one day you just went under there and looked with a flashlight, and it was just dust bunnies or something sitting under your bed. Nothing scary at all.
Mhm.
I feel like that's sometimes how we make mountains out of our fear. If we just
Yeah.
look at it, sometimes they are really bad and scary, but a lot of times I think we have created a fear that's worse than what the reality actually is.
Yes, and you just mentioned something like about being a coach
Mhm.
and helping people do exactly what you just said about looking under the bed. And that's why I think a lot of this inner work needs somebody like a guide, a mentor, a coach, somebody who's either traveled those scary places themselves and know the terrain, or that have some way of holding you as you go through your own exploration, because it is scary. And even though this amazing kind of reframe I've got about there's a treasure, there's let's keep going. It's still very hard, very, very painful. So doing it alone, I think, is not as easy as having a companion that's there with you. And I like to say, I'll hold your hand. People say, I've got your back. I like to say, I've got your hand.
I like that. I think that feels more personal
Yeah.
and more comforting actually than I got your back just sounds like something people say.
Yes.
I'll hold your hand. I've got your hand. That feels so deeply personal. I actually felt it when you said it, just like
Oh,
somebody's got my hand.
yeah.
And so it's more touching.
Uh-huh.
Words are so important, the words that we use. It could
Yeah.
mean a similar thing, but changing around a few words makes all the difference in the world.
And the way that you just responded to it too and said that you felt it, and then I felt you feeling it. And that made me remember how where I learned that, I think, was with my sister. I told you the story early on where mom was in and out of the hospital. And I think that's probably where I first became a caretaker is with my sister, and saying, we're going to go through this together, you know?
And that's not easy. I mean, you must have been young when that all happened. So that had to be a very difficult role to step into as a child yourself.
Yeah, being the responsible one.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the thing that us oldest ones always have to do, right? It's
Yeah.
hard. It's definitely hard, and I feel that whether you've had to grow up too fast or you weren't heard, whatever it is, we all have some childhood issue that I think until we really peel back the layers and look at it, we don't really step into that whole authentic version of ourselves.
Mhm.
Just knowing that we felt a certain way, it was this way, just acknowledging it, it really changes the outcome of how we show up in the world. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm saying that right, but I think you know what
Well,
I mean.
what you're opening right now for me is, what is authenticity really? What does authentic mean? I grew up and came of age during the 70s, and that was a whole different kind of, well, what does authentic means? It means you say what's on your mind, and you say whatever, and it doesn't matter who you say it to, or how you say it to, or how you say it. And I think that that's not what authentic means. I think that I like to think of it, authenticity is a relationship with your inner truth, yes, but there's a human in front of you, and are you expressing it in a way that you're going to be heard, actually? And if it's just blasting, then you're not going to get to where you probably want to be, is seen and heard for whatever it is that you want to say to somebody. So I like to hear more about what you think authenticity is
This
too.
is a great conversation because it's hard to really explain, isn't it? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
you get a feeling of what authenticity is, and when somebody is authentic. You can feel it when they're not. But how do you define? Sometimes our English language is, or all language is lacking when
Yeah.
it comes to these
Mhm.
things. I would agree with you. I agree that you can't just blast things out there. I used to do that. It didn't really turn out too well.
Yes, you say that. Yes.
I can tell you from experience, it did not turn out well. You really wind up creating a bigger gap between you and that person when truth is blasted.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
would say what I do now is different. And I have to think about how to articulate this difference. I think what I do differently, instead of just feeling what I believe is the truth from only my perspective and blasting it, which was my old way of doing things, I would say that now I look at what I believe could be the truth, and then I examine it closely,
Mhm.
meaning, okay, this may be how I feel, but how does that person feel? And maybe I look at other angles, and then I look at maybe other angles within me, and then come up with maybe what is really bothering me about that. So it takes a lot of dissection. And then I deliver it in just a sweeter way, but still in my power. I think there's a real fine balance with saying something that's still powerful, but kind, compassionate, and loving. And
Yeah.
it can all be done. It just takes a lot of work. I don't know. I don't know if that's really what authenticity is, but I just thought I just try to think about how I manage conflict now versus how I managed it before. But I think it comes from a place of authenticity, of just digging down deep within me and see why I'm reacting to it that way.
Mhm. Yes. I think your description is perfect. I think that the first is a curiosity, which I keep coming back to, and it's also a listening. And you didn't say this, but that's what I got, is that you listened to somehow you were listening. You were asking yourself questions and you were listening to what the answer was for yourself. To me, that seems like an important component of what you said. And
Mhm.
then the listening, and then there's the kind of weighing, the measuring. You're right. It's a lot of processes, but once you know how to do it more quickly. So how do you have to be able to be quiet, I think. Take a breath, be quiet, listen to your heart, listen to your gut, listen to your agitation, listen to whatever is happening that you're reacting to, and then uh, pause perhaps and really tap into what's the next thing, because then that's a whole different process. Is who am I going to say whatever I'm going to say to? Or even if it's like a large audience where you've got a script or something, it still feels like pausing and feeling. You used the word purpose a little while ago. It's like, what's the purpose? What's the result I want here?
Mhm.
So I'm just adding a little bit to the basic process you laid out, which was go inside, look, feel, um, listen, and explore what next is what you really want, and then expressing it is a whole process, and then what to do once it's been expressed and somebody else has a reaction.
Hmm. But would you say that's really the definition of authenticity? I don't know.
I think it's how to be. I think it's more about the being of authenticity.
I
And
would say that. Yeah.
what you pointed to feels like the finding of authenticity,
I
the
would agree.
finding and the being and the expressing.
Okay, yeah, I would say that that feels like it resonates, and maybe also just you mentioned the quiet. I think part of being authentic is actually taking all those cues and really processing them in a very quiet way. That might be a part of it. I mean, wow, we really got into a deep topic here. I'm like, how do we describe authenticity?
Yes, yeah.
It's just interesting to me because I know in my body when I meet somebody that is genuine and authentic. Like right now, I feel like there are no masks up. We're just really connecting on a very deep level, even if it's through a screen. So I feel the authenticity. It is a frequency that's easily identifiable.
Yeah.
Yet, to put it into words is really, I'm in a conundrum here of how to really explain it. We should ask ChatGPT and see what it says.
Uh-huh. Well, I love the dancing in the moment with you around the topic that is both really so important to us. I think is important to you, because I think that's what people are finding their way to us, because they see that we've learned something about about being more authentic and how to do it, and the how is different than, like what I said, the being of it, the speaking, because it's not just a doing. You don't do authenticity, you are authenticity, or you are authentic.
Right.
Oh,
Well, one other thing I'll say that I feel is really relevant is that sometimes I say it's like putting on a mask. So I say this because in surgery, I wore a mask.
Yes.
And I felt like in my whole medical career, I didn't ever really take the mask off. So whether it was physically off, I felt it was still on because I could not be the authentic version of me within my career. What that did was it made it increasingly exhausting to go into work every day. So now let's flip that on its head. Here it is. I would I feel like I went into work and I was working. Here we are on a Sunday evening and I'm doing the show. I do not feel that it is stressing me out. It is not disturbing in any way to me. I guess one could classify it as work. It doesn't feel like it. So I think when we are embracing our authenticity or something that we authentically and genuinely like to do, it's funny how those lines can get blurred. What's work theoretically doesn't feel like it. And yet, if you have to put on a facade, put on a mask, and go do something that doesn't feel like you, it feels very difficult.
Yeah, I'm thinking about when I first was a psychologist right out of training, and it felt like I didn't know what I was doing, really. I had all those years of training and tests and
Mhm.
exams that made me. I was really scared to show up to take those oral exams, but I did do all of it. I did everything I needed to do. And there I was. Okay, I'm in an office with somebody and I'm supposed to, what am I really supposed to do here? And what eventually I think I discovered that my being absolutely open to possibility with this human being in front of me meant so much more than all those volumes that I had studied, all those theories about what to say, how to say it, treatment strategies. And I think just the heart to heart, the hello in there, the person across from me.
Mhm.
I think that in my own journey to become more authentic as a psychologist or as a I'm calling myself a fearless speaking mentor now,
Mhm.
that in itself, and you're talking about in your journey, uh, in your professional journey, finding yourself, finding more authentic way of being in this universe, making a living.
Yeah, that's been my journey for sure. One of the things that I notice about you, I've met plenty of psychologists in my day, obviously, with the fields are, we come across each other quite a bit. There is this aura of ego with many of the psychologists that I've met.
Yeah.
It's just, it goes with the profession. I think just like it goes with being a surgeon. So it's one of those things.
Yeah.
So I feel that that's something you have had to have done some incredible work around is dismantling those parts of your ego. Or, I mean, is that part of what you feel led to you becoming more authentic or?
Uh, uh, ew. I had a choice to go to UC Berkeley, which is pretty traditional, or the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology.
Ooh.
What do I choose? Transpersonal psychology was all about, more about possibility and, transpersonal experiences, just a different kind of growth. And of course, the traditional model was one of which you do diagnosis and treatment strategies. I have to tell you, I chose UC Berkeley because I felt like in the end, I could do both and I would have more authority because I have a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, as opposed to some Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, which probably doesn't exist anymore. But uh, so that 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 first choice was confusing for me because I wanted to be more in the growth model as opposed to the medical model,
Mm-hmm.
which, treatment and diagnosis and the DSM. whatever number it happens to be on now.
Maybe, who knows? I think I've seen it as far as 6 or something. I don't even know. You would know better than me.
I had to take a test on it for sure. But so I guess what I'm trying to say there, because you mentioned the ego, I feel like I never really had an ego. In fact,
Mm.
I think the journey to be more of who I am in a field where there is a lot of ego has been courageous.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And I would guarantee you that's how the clients who find you because of that. You
Mhm.
have a very calming presence about you. I feel, even though, you and I have never met personally, and I was on your podcast and here you are on my show, but it's just this calming presence that you have. I feel like I could just spill all kinds of things to you and I wouldn't be judged in
Yeah.
any way at all. That I would just be met with compassion and understanding. And because many psychologists I've met tend to have this aura of, I know this, and this is what I do. And that is not a comforting energy to be around. I wouldn't say anything to that person, frankly.
And I think, in terms of me feeling courageous now in offering this new way of working in a field that's gutted with public speaking coaches.
Right.
Let's get on a stage, and you want to be a motivational speaker, or you want to get out there and, I don't know, your book, maybe you need to get out and it's about to be launched, and this is how you do it. And I think that, as I said in the very, very beginning today with you, is that I feel like that people need somebody like me. They need somebody who it will help them go through fear, find their voice, heal the wounded voice, and find the strength, the essence of who they truly are deep inside. You can call it a superpower. You could call it their very core essence, and be able to find words that come up, not words that come from the head, but words, true words that come up. And that means you do have to learn how to go down, and you have to go down through fear, you have to go down into and through all of that, and then you land in the gold, like the golden Buddha story, that
Right.
was covered with what, cement, and then they found it was really gold inside.
Yeah. One thing that's coming up for me when you're talking about the, speakers who are speaking coaches and whatnot, there is a very transactional element to that whole conversation.
Huh.
And I've met plenty of speaking coaches, it's something funny about the minute people hear the word doctor in front of your name, they want to sell you something. It happens quite a bit. And so it's, and I'm fine I like working with certain people, but I'm very selective of who I choose to work with. And anyway, so most of those conversations start with, I can help you launch this and that. And,
Yes.
it's very common in the industry. But I
Mhm.
feel that that has a very transactional, disingenuous ring to that whole pitch.
Mhm.
So, meaning that if I say, Hi, I'm Dr. Kalpana Sundar, and I've got a book called Beauty Unbound, and it's going to help you change your life.
Uh-huh.
That sounds very different from, see, that's never would be the way I would say it, but I have a feeling I've talked to some of these coaches and I'm not saying it's exactly like that, but it's some version of that. It
Yeah.
sounds something like that. Whereas there's a different voice and a different way it comes out when you don't care if anybody buys your book or not. I frankly never, I remember when I first wrote my book and I got on somebody's podcast and she's like, How are you marketing it? And this, that. And I said, You know what? I said, and she looked at me like I had 3 heads. I said, I never wrote the book to make money off of it. I never did. It was never a thing. I spent a lot of money writing it and paying for all the things, but it was a labor of love. I had to get the story out there. I didn't care. I still don't care. If people read it and it helps them, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, for me, the disconnect with these people who are speaking coaches, I am not interested in selling anybody anything. And I feel that you're probably I can see that you're the same way. If somebody wants to work with you, fabulous.
Yeah.
If they don't, fabulous. Then there's somebody that's a better fit for them. That's great.
Yes. Yeah.
There's plenty to go around.
Yeah.
I have a roof over my head. I've got food to eat. I'm thrilled.
Yes, yes. That feels really the way you just described it felt spacious. That you are open and spacious, and you aren't driven. Although I know you're, because I know you already. You do drive yourself, but that doesn't feel like what you're going for is all of that kind of. Um, let's make more, more, more. It's like maybe let's have more of what's possible. I think is what I feel like you help us do.
That's a beautiful way to say it. And I think that it's so important. What you're doing and the way that you're doing it, I've never heard a speaking, in any kind of speaking mentor, coach, anybody put it in this way. It's all about the delivery. It's all about just
Yeah,
something that feels very disingenuous. So I really, really applaud you for just putting it all out there, helping people be their authentic version of themselves. And that could easily shift over time. I'm sure you've probably seen it with your
yeah,
clients.
yes,
One
yes,
level, and
yes,
then there's a greater level of authenticity that comes
yes.
later, like peeling
Well,
layers of an onion.
leaving the corporate world is one thing, right? Like you left the medical world. And then it's like, okay, here I am more lined up with what I want to be teaching or doing or the kind of business I want to create. That's a whole nother level of finding your voice. You're right.
So true. And it's really a fascinating, I'm just thinking about the topics of conversation I could have with you. And I'm like, God, I could probably talk to you for 7 hours.
Well,
And
there
you,
is one thing I do want to. I'm not going to go through all my 7 secrets that I've written about in
of
my
course,
book, but I do want to, because you just pointed to how different my process is.
mhm.
And I would say that each of the 7 secrets, 7 steps I talk about begin with be. And the
Oh,
first one is be still. The second one is be present. And then each one thereafter starts with be, because speaking is comes from a being. It's not about what you say. Yeah, the words are important, but it's really more about the you said it in the very, very beginning when you introduced the show about the sound and the feel of what what truth and what genuine and what authenticity feels like to somebody else. You can sense it. So my work is about helping people be who they are, not just, oh, just go out and be yourself. Well, that's the last step on my process. Be yourself.
basically, it sounds like with your process, anybody could be speaking on a stage. Once they get through your process, they can be an authentic version of themselves, which I'm sure will transpire and change over time, but they can actually just do it.
Yes.
And that's inspiring. I
Right.
love it. I really, I really love this. So I've got, for all of you guys watching, I have her website down here. So check her out. I was on her podcast, and she does a lovely job of hosting her podcast as well. So yeah, I think they can get information on the podcast too if they want to be a guest. Same website, right?
Yes. It's on the DoreenDowning.com. Yes. My website is listed there also.
Perfect. And they can also find you on YouTube and Facebook. Is it all the same name?
Doreen Downing. Yes. Should
Okay,
be.
figured, but just wanted to make sure that
Hope
I
so. It's a whole nother story how I found my voice and found the man that I totally love and
I
have
know
been.
we didn't even get into that. I was so intrigued at the conversation. I wanted to get into that. Where, well, you know what? I'll just have you on another time and we can
Yes,
get into
and we'll
part two
do
of
we'll
that.
do relationship talk then.
I love it. I love it. I mean, this was such a fascinating conversation. I love it when I look up and I say, "Oh my God, the show's almost over. You gotta wrap this up," because that means I was just
Yes,
intrigued with the conversation, which I genuinely was. But I
good.
am so grateful to you, and on behalf of the people who need your help, I am grateful that you exist and have this wonderful process identified for them that can help them on their speaking journey. We need more authentic speakers out there. We really do.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And yes, next time we will talk all about relationships.
It will be a pleasure to have more time with you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad we connected. Have a lovely evening.
All right.
Bye bye. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did because we really almost ran out of time. But in any case, next week I'm going to be interviewing Brian Lee, who is the general manager of the University Club. So we're going to talk about hospitality. So a totally different topic, but I love having different topics on this show. So hope you guys have a fabulous evening, and I can't wait to see you next week for another episode of Gloves Off. Oh, and it's Super Bowl Sunday. So if you don't want to watch the Super Bowl, watch this. Bye, everyone.
Mm-hmm.